Hello, everyone. I'm Ishita, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's panel on the topic that truly excites me personally: AI, art, and design, and music. How is AI not only shaping creativity, but how is it revolutionizing the way we experience, create art, music, and design? That's what we're here to discuss today, and I'm super excited to dive in with our two incredible panelists, Darek and Dr. López Torres. A true cultural engineer, Derek has been an influential voice in the world of global music. As a host and DJ for Vogue Pop on KEXP, the artistic director of Sama Art and Music, and a creative director, he has dedicated his career to exploring how music and storytelling can unite diverse cultures. He brings a unique perspective on how AI intersects with traditional music and its role in fostering a more inclusive and diverse sound space. Glad to have you here, Derek.
Nice to
And,
be here.
and introducing Dr. Lopez Torres, a brilliant researcher and designer. Dr. Lopez Torres is at the forefront of human AI interaction and experienced design at NC State. Her work is shaping how AI tools and creative industries interact, focusing on building meaningful, ethical relationships between humans and AI in the design process. Really glad for you to be here, Dr. Lopez Torres.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So let's jump right in and explore how AI is changing the world of creativity. And super excited to have you all join us today. And we will have a Q&A session towards the end. So in the meanwhile, feel free to, add into the Q&A if you have any questions while we're talking, but we'll address the questions towards the end. So this is going to be a really fascinating discussion. And let's start with Derek, whose experiences with global music have allowed him to deeply appreciate this intersection of culture and sound. So Derek, as someone who has championed music from around the world, I know you were in the Europe for quite a bit and then in the US now. How do you see AI impacting the preservation and the evolution of traditional music forms?
Thanks for being here. Thanks for inviting me, I should say. I think this is a really interesting time, especially in the context of how AI could be impacting music preservation. The reality of music is intriguing. If you look at the history of how music has been recorded, it's relatively new. It started in the obviously late 1800s, early 1900s, and the way that music was actually able to be recorded became compact, relatively compact. You had a crew of three people traveling all over the world, usually being funded by um, government institutions, Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungary, England, and through its colonies to record the artists that were living there as a way to um, A, to sell gramophones, and B, to document what was going on. That accelerated really quickly. You had records, then you had cassettes, compacting, then CDs, then streaming, all of this capability to find things that for hundreds, if thousands years would just not have been accessible to you because people weren't traveling that much. It was an opportunity. It was just rare people could do that. Things have accelerated even more so. Music became an industry. Songs didn't have limits of time. The reason why songs were compacted is because when your recording engineer came by and started recording you, it was like, this is how much time we could actually put on either the record or any particular device. Um, and then people started to change their music. Suddenly they became a way of money exchanging for their work. The role of troubadour started changing, the storyteller wandering through. Um, Technology just started advancing, and then suddenly you find yourself in a situation like we have right now, where devices such as phones, laptops, cloud. is available literally all over the world. I travel a lot, and I'm always shocked when I'm in different places. Like I remember telling you, I was just in the jungles of Malaysia, and it was amazing how technologically advanced people are. I'll give you a quick example. In the past, we would get like a cassette, and then we would get, a record or something from a faraway region. For my radio show, sometimes I will have somebody send me something they just recorded on their phone that day at a festival in Bamako, and I'm able to play it on my radio show that night. It's that fast. It's going through less and less gatekeepers to be accessible. Now, we're in this place right now. With AI, the thing that I find most interesting is that the various cultures that are starting to use this technology, these tools, and I consider AI to be a tool, will start applying it in a way that's unique to them. The thing that I found most interesting in music, and one of the reasons I'm focusing on traditional music right now, is that musicians tend to emulate whatever's popular. So, like, you'll find a version of Beyonce anywhere in the world. There's an, but how are they going to find a way to create their own interpretation of what's going on around them right now? Well, how AI is going to be able to allow them to have a place at the table internationally is the thing that I find most intriguing, because then they'll be able to preserve and present that music not wrapped up in a way that is digestible by the mainstream or the West or even the East. It's going to be this powerful tool where, like, no, no, this is us. We're this particular part of Indonesia, or this particular part of Java, where it's an opportunity to highlight a particular tribe or a region or an identity that just would not have been able to bubble up because the the amount of noise that we were getting about things that were more dominant would just cycle away. And so I think the thing that I found most interesting about it is that we don't know how it's going to do it, how it's going to happen yet. But the fact that these things, these tools are there for you to put up your tent and say, no, this is who we are. And now you have an opportunity to come and check out who we are. It doesn't need to be watered down. It doesn't need to be digestible because they'll have an opportunity to rise it up, and you will now make a choice of whether you want to check it out or not. But the fact that it's available is going to be the most interesting.
Wow, very insightful. And I know you bring in your experience from tech background as well into this. So it's a really unique intersection you are at when you're truly merging technology for the good use and, evolving music elegantly, traditional music elegantly.
Hmm.
But
Thank you.
it's a really interesting field that you both are in. So our conversation is gonna dip in and out between music and design. So really fun to kind of merge these fields together. So just to shift the gears a little, we're also joined by López Torres, whose research is helping shape the future of AI design. So Dr. López Torres, your work focuses on relationship between humans and AI. So, with AI tools becoming integral part of our lives, and especially in creative industries, like we see Sora AI, and we see all these prompt engineering tools which we can use to create new designs and like AI generated artwork. How do you envision designers fostering meaningful and ethical relationship between creators and AI? I think we are, exposed to a lot of these different controversial scenarios, through media where, there was an art contest and, after they awarded the winner, a month later, they found out it was actually AI generated art. So there's so many issues, and we would love to get to know more about your kind of background around that.
Yeah, so there's so much that we are currently uncovering in relationship to AI, particularly for us designers, seeing as a tool, as a design material. So there are interesting challenges there as far as authorship and creativity as well. And this is one of the biggest pain points that I think most people in educational setting are dealing with, this idea of, well, was this created by an AI with the help of an AI? Is this used as a tool, or is this used as a shortcut? But more specifically for designers, I think the ethical considerations are are many. As I mentioned, we talk about creativity and authorship and also copyrights, and try to understand what are the nuances that we have to consider when we have systems that effectively design and create. I think we are experiencing a very intense paradigm, or a shift in our paradigm, where we used to assume that humans were the only ones to create anything, let alone design. And now we are seeing that there are more and more systems, non-human systems, that are creating and effectively making things. And so it changes our relationship to our tools, and looking at AI as a tool versus AI as a collaborator, AI as another element or material that we integrate in our design process. So it really can look can take many different directions. But I think a couple of the most pressing issues related to ethics, at least in my field, have to do with this idea of the motivation. Darek, you mentioned, this moment where music became an industry and how that really changed a lot. And I think this is true for our field as well. When AI is integrated into many processes and many businesses are jumping into the AI wagon, what are the motivations behind that? Is this with the goal of uh, saving money and automating the job that maybe a human would do? We have to question those goals, because those are goals that humans set. There is a very specific decision of, investing in an AI system with the goal of saving money, maximizing profit, and automating, human tasks and human jobs. And I think that a lot of the animosity that a lot of people experience when it comes to AI comes from that fear. But I think the narrative that we've been hearing is that, oh, AI is going to take over our jobs, and the machines are going to take over the world. But we have to look carefully at where are these stories and these narratives come from, and never forget that all of these are choices, and many of them by design. And so there's a purpose and an intent behind it. And so for us as designers, and for myself as a researcher, as an educator as well in the design space, it's really about clarifying that, is there an intent? Is there a motivation? And being very critical about why are we using AI, and not just assuming that because there's a technological solution that that's going to be the best solution. I think that a critical skill for students nowadays to acquire and to develop is this ability to think critically with technology, not technology for technology's sake, but there has to be a very specific purpose. And don't forget that, machines can only do so much. There are things that machines can do better than a human, but there are things that humans can do better than machines. And so if we have a much more balanced approach to how we are understanding technology in a larger social context, then we can start making more uh, uh, specific decisions about when to use AI or any other type of tool for that matter. Another element that in my own research I've uncovered is this idea of transparency, which is related to understanding the provenance of something. So in the context of, for example, generative AI, an image that we might see online, the element of transparency is manifest in, do I, as a user or as a viewer, know that this was AI created or not? And that in itself, that knowledge, that transparency of the provenance, do I know it's machine generated or human created, allows me to recalibrate my response to it and my experience. This has a lot to do with misinformation, with obscuring, the provenance of something. And so it's not that, generative AI or AI generated art or images for that matter are intrinsically good or bad, but in what context are they being used and for what purpose? And are you purposefully obscuring that this was AI generated? I'm thinking, for example, the AI fakes, the deep fakes, where you can effectively make someone look like they're doing something or saying something that they really didn't. And the purposes for, nefarious purposes most of the time. And so that is also very related to ideas about agency. As human beings, as consumers of media, as users of these tools, do we have that ability to um, to have a say, a seat at the table, in a way? And Darek, you also mentioned, having a place at the table internationally when you were talking about, the expansion of technology and music. And I think we're at a crossroads point there. Are we benefiting only the global north? What about the global south? And is that going to actually increase the division and increase the inequity? Or is this actually truly something that can help us? And I think we are in that inflection point where we have to be very careful about how we're teaching these tools. Yes, there is excitement, and yes, there is the novelty factor, and there's a lot of innovation that's coming out of the AI, particularly in design, but there's a lot of, um, as I mentioned, misinformation and just not a clarity of what these tools are, how they work, and why are they here. So, just to close out kind of this question, I lead my work and my research and my own practice with the idea that um, we should always be looking at the futures, and futures in plural. There isn't one future just there waiting for us to get there, around the corner. A lot of people say that, oh, when machines take over, or the singularity, or these things that are most often brought in, via science fiction and the stories we've read about AI and all of that. But really, nothing has been written. We are writing it as we speak. And so if we are careful about that and how we view AI and how we talk about I think we will be in a better shape to make decisions with technology that benefit us instead of exacerbate our big inequalities and issues that we live in today's society.
Wow, you truly bring up very insightful points, and I think you really touch the whole reason behind why we're doing this panel series, because we want people to understand that it's just not about AI, or it's just not about a specific discipline. It's so much bigger than that. It's about our future, which we're actively shaping as we are in it. And I think you bring up and you touched all the buzzwords that we hear, like deepfakes and AI generated art, Gen AI. And I think these things really kind of intersect and come together as like for us to approach as we think about how we shape our, day-to-day choices, our lifestyle choices. And as you bring up, critical thinking is truly essential as we are in this digital economy, really bombarded by a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and just like a lot of information floating around us, trying to decipher between what is AI, what is not, what is truly intentional, what is just, malicious. So thank you so much for that. And I think coming on to the other aspect of, ethics in the creative spaces. Of course, there's ethical concerns even in music, right, Darek? In your experience, what do you think are the ethical considerations that we should be aware of, especially when it comes to, remixing or reinterpreting music from different cultures? You're also in the DJ space, so we're really interested to hear about your views on that.
Okay. Okay. Am I muted? No, I'm good. Okay. So those are all great points. It's interesting because even the remixing space, I want to kind of like riff a little bit about what Dr. López was talking about, López Torres. There's a bit of a generational shift that's going on right now. We're in kind of this hyper accelerated space where the things that we thought were going to be a problem are moving past being a problem to something else that we don't quite know yet. I'm sorry to be vague like this, but the analogy that I can come up with is my own two children. I have teenagers. And for a long time, we were like, oh my God, they're spending too much time on their devices. What's going on, especially during COVID? They're now creating their own scene with their friends. They're 15 and 18. And their relationship with authenticity is very different than what I expected it to be with AI, with the ability to create artwork easily just with prompts. They're not interested in that. They pull away from that. They're actually making posters and flyers for their shows, for their concerts. They're doing like house concerts and loft parties, etc. They're using copiers, like the DIY punk rock thing where you would cut and paste and use a copier. They're using social media. They're using AI very differently than the way we thought they were going to use it. To your point, Valerie, it's like you think the future's going to go this way. It's going in a completely different direction. And there is a generational kind of like understanding that we're not part of. Like I'm in the music space, I'm in the culture space. There's stuff going on. I was just in New York a couple of days ago, and there's stuff going on that I have no idea, and it's huge. But the thing is that I'm not supposed to know it because it's its own particular scene. There's stuff going on in Queens, there's stuff that's going on in different parts of Brooklyn. Different cultures are creating their own opportunity to gather together and create music, create art. They're opening it up to others. To answer your question, Ishita, it's these things about that we're talking about, ethics, remix culture, what is authentic versus not authentic, are moving really quickly. Like I'll give you an example, autotune. When autotune came out, you guys are familiar with autotune? Okay. When it came out, everybody in the music industry was just like, this is disgusting. How can you do this? Autotune is becoming a tool. It's just another way to manipulate your voice. And that whole ethical question of like, that's not real music. How dare you do this? Has moved on quickly. It's just the way it happened with synthesizers. There were records that came out that were saying like no synthesizers were used in making this. These all of these artists are like, we're going to get wiped out by synthesizers. Synthesizers right now are artifacts. You know, like you're seeing these beautiful analog synthesizers with these cherry woods around them. They've gone from being hated to being venerated and are being positioned in the academy like you would find in like an amazing old guitar. I'm seeing this kind of space, like where remixing, okay, how are you actually going to incorporate this? Are you incorporating these sounds in this music in a way that kind of enlivens the song and creates a really interesting opportunity for people to learn something about that? Or are you just really hyper focused on authenticity? Or is it like, is this real? I deal with this all the time. It was like, especially with the way different, like an immigrant's perspective of music from their home is going to be different than somebody that's living there right now because things change when I'm an immigrant. Things change when you move. So I'm wary of like this urge sometimes, especially in certain groups of legitimacy and authenticity. Like, who are you to judge? Where are you to judge? And as soon as somebody starts waving a finger, I'm like, I don't know. Let's dig a little deeper because every generation is going to have a different perspective on this. And I was thinking about this before when we were talking yesterday, and when I was traveling here, it was like these things are moving so quickly that I want to keep the conversation open to realize that what we think is a problem right now, and we start applying a solutionist perspective to this, really is kind of missing the point to me because you need to open up space for other generations, other cultures to start applying this in a different way. Like WhatsApp was a revolution. And it was a revolution to me because of suddenly there's this tool that allows me to connect with people, and I'm starting to get files really quickly sent to me. Like even during COVID with Sama, I wanted to talk to people to bring them into this space that we're in right now. And because of cloud, I'm suddenly able to create amazing video and audio with communities living in the middle of the jungle of Colombia. That would have been impossible years ago. And because they're coming up and we're able to see them, and goodness, what could happen with AI once they have that and they bring up their culture in there, their sense of empowerment and being able to share that to the world, this is a two-way street, is going to really change our perspective globally. And to close with this, and I'm really intrigued with user experience and design because fundamentally, here's the tool. And this happens a lot with my with the people I work with at Microsoft and Google and Amazon. Amazon not so much because they're consumer focused, but sometimes engineers make something, and it really takes a while for people to start using it, and try to figure out how to do that. I worked in mobile for years, and I have in my house, I think I told you, see, I have like a wall where all of the devices that I started work with, like the early Motorola flip phones, all the way now to, the most cutting edge Android and iPhones. And if you would have told me in 2000 that this Motorola flip phone was going to have the capability of what an iPhone is right now, it's my travel agent, it's my television show, it's this whole other it's my tricorder, communicating device. We're moving in a really interesting space here. And from a cultural perspective and the ethics that we're talking about here, I want to make sure that we're as fluid with this as possible, because it's so easy to just fall into this like rigid box, and then suddenly it's like I'm not sure. I'm not sure because things are moving quickly. And going back to my kids' generation and what they're doing, they can smell it. If you're not being authentic, they don't want anything to do with it. And the other thing that they're pushing against is laziness. Like if they're
Mhm.
seeing that these tools allow you to create something, you're just being lazy. You're not doing the work. Like, have you guys read this a recent piece that just came out about the CEO, Mikey Schulman of Suno AI? He said that musicians don't want to work so hard on making music. AI is going to make music easier because it's too hard to make
Mm.
music. And it's like, but wait a second, you learn how to make music by learning how to use the tools.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
push against that, but I don't know what kind of tools is going to offer me. Like synthesizers allowed you to make music easier, and then it became a different kind of music. And then that legitimacy question about synthesizers are legitimate instruments or not went away.
Yeah.
And I think we're
I
in that
agree,
space right now
Derek.
with this.
I
Sorry,
think
I'm
you
going
make
on and
great
on.
points. Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
mean, I think I just wanted to jump in because I want to piggyback on some of the comments that you made, particularly, yes, I mean, authenticity. It took me, a whole doctoral research to realize that truly authenticity is in the eye of the beholder. But this is more specific to people establishing meaningful emotional relationships with AI chatbots. But and I'm happy to talk about that, of course. But kind of putting that aside, when you talk about this idea of like remix culture coming back, I totally agree. I think that we've seen this over and over again throughout history of art and music and all and technology in itself. Going back to the I don't know, like the early 19th century, the arts and crafts movement was a return to the more handmade, talking about the methods of production and the care and craft and the human touch and the what is called the aura of an object, that comes from this deep involvement of the human creativity applied with craft and tools to create something as a response to the industrial movement that a lot of artists and different people responded to that. We've seen that over and over again. And, with remix culture, and I'm thinking, as someone who, grew up in the 90s and who actually interact with cassette tapes, and I made my mixtapes like that, it was part of that DIY, like really learning how to do it and the thrill of doing that. And of course, we've seen that in like many other areas. Hip hop, for example, was born out of just remixing and sampling, and that brought a lot of changes when it comes to copywriting and authorship and reimagining what that might look like. When we had new technology like streaming technology for music, that changed the whole paradigm for musicians and artists in the music industry. And I think that we're seeing something else along those similar lines happening here in AI. We have a popular term that's been popping up online recently, this idea of AI slop, which is just AI generated imagery that is just devoid of any soul, really. It's just there to crowd our visual spaces. What it's doing to our visual landscape is just confusing it. It's just it's a way for people are going to start getting tired of AI's love, just senseless, meaningless images and AI generated context. And so going back to that idea of like, I think that, there's something cyclical about this. And I think we've seen it over and over again in my own particular discipline, design. Things were deeply transformed in the early 90s when we started working with computers to do a lot of the work that was traditionally made by hand with, yes, different tools, different technologies, but not digital technology. And a lot of designers had, fears and were just worried about what that might do to the profession. And a few decades after, we are really just this is the primary way in which we produce design, and graphic design is alive and well. It is changing. It's very transformative, and the things that I used to teach 10 years ago are no longer relevant, and it's part of understanding that, but also going back to the idea of, yeah, I mean, I think as designers we're so process oriented, and anyone who takes any delight in that, in the process of research and making and the trial and error and prototyping and iteration, why would I want a system to do it for me? Like, sure, it can be done, but that doesn't mean I'm going to use it, because I learn a lot through making, through interacting and engaging with materials, or in the process of exploring, doing research, understanding your users, whatever that might be. There is that sense of delight. And just because there's a tool that can automate that, that doesn't mean that everybody is going to use it. And obviously the quality of the work is a completely different conversation. But I think it's just the more I look at technology, the more I learn what it means to be human, and understanding that there's delight in that, and the reason why we've built so many centuries worth of jobs and traits and disciplines and ways of knowing the world is because we find delight in that. And so when we have that removal of what makes us do something, the reason to do this every day, why did I become a designer? Because there was a real human motivation behind that. And so I think that I totally agree with you, Darek. I think it's going to go in many different ways. I'm not trying to predict in any way what the AI space is going to look like, but if we learned anything from other technologies and technological revolutions throughout history, is that yes, there is obviously new things that are going to come up and will transform deeply the way we work, we collaborate, we interact, socialize, do make art, design, etc. But there's also something that we're going to want to go back to the old school, the low tech DIY, the punk mentality. And I think throughout history, we've had so many versions of that sort of punk mentality. And I think that we're going to see, and we're starting to see something like return to more intentional design and more intentional ways of doing things. And hey, last time I checked, the zine scene, this idea of like putting together your little publication and doing it by hand, is still alive and well. So I think that is exciting and something to look forward to. Not to obscure the deeper ethical concerns that are around AI, out of which climate is another one. The amount of resources that are required for AI, and so if we take that into consideration, then the urge is to be even more careful and much more selective about when and why we're using a technology. And I think that, at least personally, is my approach as I teach students about AI.
Yeah. And I really love the point you
Good
brought
points.
about, the delight. The aspect of delight is truly, I think, spot on because, there's a common belief that we hear in the technology industry that AI should handle more of the technical and labor-intensive tasks so it can free up time for humans to do more tasks that are creative, art-oriented, more expression-oriented. But however, in the art space or the design space, in the creative spaces, there's this notion, it can feel counterintuitive that AI is sort of replacing designers, AI is sort of freeing up time for musicians, but it's truly about that delight. So, we can enjoy the human experience of creating art rather than even automating that. So I love the conversation and the discussion we had just now. And I also wanted to start another discussion around the inherent bias that we see in AI. And this question is for both of you because we'd like to hear both viewpoints in design and as well as music. So we all are aware that AI systems often inherit biases from data they are trained on, and it's a challenge that's wide. It has wide-ranging implications across many industries. So, from a UI UX point of view, and also from a music perspective, how can both designers, artists work with technologists together to ensure these systems are um, free from biases and have more content that is fair, inclusive, and just free from biases that perpetuate existing inequities or inequalities in our society. So anybody pick
Um,
it up first?
I can
Okay.
speak from the UX UI perspective. I don't think that biases are something that we can get away from. And leading with that is important. Yes, it is going to be biased. Any data set that any large language model or any AI model for that matter is trained on is inherently biased because it's trained on human uh, knowledge and human experience, and we are biased. So I think that leading with that will allow designers then to be more careful and yeah, careful in taking the AI's advice or recommendation or however AI might be integrated in their workflow as the final kind of authority or the final say. I think more and more we're emphasizing this idea of a like an AI co-pilot. In a way, it can be, think of it as your advisor. It can give some suggestions based on data and can do it in much more faster and maybe more efficiently than a human would. But never to allow that AI system or recommendation, whatever that might be, to have final say. I don't see at all a future where designers just push a button and they have a magic design solution created. I don't think that is where we want to go, and I don't think that's the case. But it's more about contextualizing the role of AI and understanding that it is always going to be flawed and it's going to make mistakes. But even in those mistakes, in those flaws, there's something to be learned about. And what I love about letting students tinker with technology and playing with it is this understanding that yes, not only AI systems, but any type of technology is not perfect. It's going to make mistakes, but there's something that those mistakes are telling you. What do you learn about those mistakes? And learning about, okay, how was this data set compiled, whose voices are represented here, whose voices are not represented here, and just really being much more aware about the context in which the design activities are taking place. And really just starting to think more systemically. Things are not isolated. Things don't live in a vacuum. Everything is connected to everything else. So that ability to make sense of one single data point and extrapolate it to make inferences about what that larger data set or system or whatever that might be can tell you is something that is crucial for designers nowadays to learn. So yeah, just I don't think that bias is something that we can get away from. I think that as long as we highlight that property of any output of any AI model, understanding that it's never completely certain, that it's never flawless, and that it's never completely accurate, can foster a more authentic relationship between designers and AI. And I think that is applicable to other areas in which humans might collaborate, work with, interact with AI systems.
I completely agree. Anytime you have this almost religious perspective on it, like This needs to be infallible. You need to come up with something that's just not human. Like humans are very fallible, and in that fallibility, they learn, and then through that growth process, then things change. I've distilled my career down to cultural engineering over working in a wide range of fields, technology, advertising, marketing, film, music, etc. And it's if for this to work, for AI to be the tool that I feel it can be not to avoid this, but to learn from that bias and to grow from that, it comes down to the people that are making it and continue to refine it. I mean, obviously, there's questions about AI right now as being an agent and speaking within its own, dare I say, matrix and evolving past that. I'm not that afraid at this particular point. I feel there's an industry of, expertise, shall we say, that is like, I know what I'm saying, or fear mongering. We live in the world that we live in. But I focus on how do we bring people together? How do we create opportunities for people to learn from each other in a real tactile way? I lean on music because music is one of the few art forms that doesn't require you to know the language or the history of the culture of the artist that's making it or what you're hearing, what you're experiencing, in order to feel it, in order for it to open up your heart and kind of like understand each other. It's also one of those intense forms that kind of explains the abstraction of life, love, grief, hope, etc., and connects you with others. And I've built a career combining STEM educated individuals and poets and artists and musicians and others to create a more robust understanding within our society of each other.
Mhm.
So, in order for this to work, we need to create more opportunities for those kind of connections to happen. I've seen too many times, especially in the technology sector, where there's just way um, too many opportunities for people to like live in silos and
Mm.
build these amazing tools, but they don't really interact as much. And so there's a bit more engineering that requires in this amazing time. I mean, AI has been around for a while, but I remember working on a huge project in 2015 in Oxford with Microsoft and the labs there. So nobody expected it to be coming to this point, but the fact that we're here now and we're talking about this, we're talking about how does this work? How does it work in such a way where it's probably the most ubiquitous technology. I like think ChatGPT's had something like a ridiculous amount. I think it's the fastest adoption rate of any technology that we've ever seen as a humanity. So that's all across the board. And obviously, you've got the east-west break, north-south break. Not break, but opportunity. I worked in China. I understand the world there and here now. But I think this requires a bit more drama, a bit more culture, a bit more of like the things that make us humans, not going to designers or engineers or others like you fix this, you got that. So it's like, no, we're human beings. How do we
Mm.
work on these things together? It's a bit
Yeah,
more of that sci-fi, a bit more utopian, but also a bit more hopeful
yeah,
in this way because it comes down to like, what do we do this as human beings? What do we
yeah,
enjoy together as human beings? Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Totally. The complexity of the human experience cannot be compartmentalized.
Yeah.
I'm of that thinking as well. You talked about agency, and I think going back to the topic of training data, another important thing that needs to be addressed, I think, when it comes to ethics is this idea of agency and consent. Uh, you know, uh, I didn't consent to be trained on, for any data that I generate through my usage of online platforms or any other tool to be trained, right? And so this idea that there should be an element of choice if we are going to move forward with AI as a tool that dominates many spaces in our society, and particularly in the art world. I mean, there's a couple of movements that come to mind that have to do with artists taking ownership, especially visual artists taking back that ownership of I don't want my particular style to be, you know, amalgamated into this large data set. for someone to train in the style that I painting or drawing or whatever without my consent or my knowledge even. And I think that's another huge area here. I mean, when we think of it, the only reason why AI is possible, and you mentioned this, Darek, AI is not new. Notions of AI and first ideas and theories were posited, in the 50s, but it took so long because we didn't have access to that data. And so obviously, since we are living our lives online, starting at, kind of the turn of the century, we have accumulated 2 decades worth of human knowledge and data. And then that's why we were able to finally be able to implement AI at the level in which we see it. And so if we are thinking of this tool to continue being pervasive, then we need more data sets. And then we come with this problem of like, well, do I want to be part of that, data set? And there's some interesting ideas of people in the tech space and elsewhere, more philosophy of technology, talking about, well, if these massive giants are profiting from data that they acquired almost for free from their users, shouldn't the end user also be compensated somehow? Or if you are voluntarily giving away your data or saying, yes, you may track me or you may do this, I should get something at the end of the say of the kind of transaction, if you will. So it also necessitates new ideas of systems, not only monetary or compensation, but just what is the role of this in the larger conversation of like building a shared knowledge, the human knowledge, and being aware of who's represented, who's not, and who actually had a choice, who didn't have a choice. And some interesting, responses from the artist community have done something about it. The ability to opt out of certain data sets of certain companies, but it certainly is not a mainstream or a common practice. And I think that's something else that we have to start thinking about as we move forward with our adoption of that. And also the idea that, well, a lot of people are already interacting with AI and don't know it. Shouldn't we know, right? Like, shouldn't we have a choice? Like, do I want, the way in which we make an online search is now changing. The first thing you see is an AI generated summary. And do you have the ability to actually double check? Is this summary actually accurate? Is this statistical sort of like representation of knowledge on the internet accurate? Where is it coming from? So going back to notions of literacy and agency and choice, it's uncovering so many things, but I choose to look at it from a positive perspective. And I think that spaces like this one, Ishita, where you're opening the conversation from all different perspectives is one important seed towards that bigger goal of living in a society where you have a choice of whether you want to be part of this technology or not. Do you want to partake by being part of the data set or how you use it, when you use it, and highlighting that idea of provenance. Do you know if it's AI generated or not?
Yeah. Brilliant conversation, and we highlight truly incredible points, and actually some of them really resonated with the audience in the Q&A. So one of the questions we have is, the gist of the question is, where do we draw the line between using a tool to create something new versus using someone else's work? And the example that was put forth was in the music industry. We see some older generations embracing remix culture like Dua Lipa or Elton John reimagining Cold Heart. So feel free to add in your thoughts. And another similar question in the art industry, how do you see artistic transformations, like the example mentioned about the BMW 7 Series and the Rolls-Royce artists contributing to the unique piece of art? So what are the ethical considerations that come into play when we blend creativity or novelty with existing work? That's kind of the gist that I get.
Got it. It's about the money. Elton John and Dua Lipa both work for Universal, the largest record label in the world. If you sign with Universal, you sign everything away. Like, I'll give you like any video, anything that you make, any content. It's insane. I've seen the contract, and it's in the future. Obviously, you're being taken care of, but they own what you have. And inevitably, you'll see that they'll take, once your career retires, they'll sell your library, your publishing rights to a hedge fund, which and then you suddenly you find, your music on commercials. It's a capitalist society. So it's the what ease of use comes in, which goes back to Valeria's point of ease of use. So we talked about a bunch of stuff here, and I would just riff on something because I'm in Boston, at my mom's house. I've bought my mom phones, laptops, etc. She's just not there. She doesn't have the language to get into that mode. Like even basic stuff, updating, etc. Are you on Wi-Fi? You're not on Wi-Fi. AI could create what I experience in China. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of propaganda about both countries, authoritative mindset, etc. It gets really muddy if you look at both societies or all societies in general. People in power want to stay in power, and they're going to do a whole bunch of stuff to do that, to stay that. But it was ridiculously easy how the technology started to um, adjust to me in that country, moving through stuff, getting ease of access. And I could see my own mother and her generation, that technology allowing her, the UX will evolve so much, which will be incredibly responsive in those situations. And that could be a big generational shift where the the fruits of that technology will also work across generation, across ages. We are living at a time where people are living much longer, and they could be much more um, contributive to society in that. But there's a level of technology. We talked about bespoke. We talked about these like these authentic things. But there's the reality of like, I don't like Spotify, but it's here and everybody's using it, even though artists don't want to be on it, but a lot of them can't afford it. Like there's a bunch of stuff that's going on there right now. And I just wanted to address that the UX is moving on many different ways and many different levels. And it's a really interesting time where since we're living in a capitalist society, as long as there's somebody that needs something solved, there are companies that are going to be offering and creating an opportunity to bring that in to make that work. But going back to that initial question, um, everything is moving so quickly, but it all comes down to the money. That song is great, but required a whole bunch of lawyers to get involved to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
That's one part. There's a whole other scene. It's called edits. You'll find it on Bandcamp and other YouTube, etc., where it's ridiculously easy to make music now. I could make a song on the subway and I could publish it on DistroKid and it's out there. I think I told you about this before. There's 150,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every single day, and less than 2% get heard more than once. And now it's 80% of the music that's uploaded to Spotify, just to that platform, that people listen to, I'm sorry, that people listen to is stuff that they already have. Like you saw this within the music industry. If you had this record, then great. Then you bought a cassette of it because you wanted to play it in your car. And then you bought the CD of it because you wanted to have that
Yeah.
ability to hear it. And then you started to download it. It's the same song, it's the same music. And then obviously now you're licensing songs. People don't own music anymore unless you're actually buying for it. So that relationship that you have with that is in constant flux, and how you're actually creating, how you're engaging with it is all moving so quickly. But that question of ethics of it, trust me, the labels have lawyers. The lawyers are going to go after you. It's like the IRS. If you're using something that's popular, Elton John, and you're putting it on a commercial, if that commercial goes public and if it starts making money, it's like the IRS coming after you. It's like there's it if it's small and underground, nobody cares. But as soon as you're making money, it's a whole other world. That's just the business that we're in.
Wow. So what I hear from this is really there's a lot of factors that are into this, and we as like an audience, we don't see everything that's behind the scenes.
No.
But yeah, really,
But
we're super grateful that we had a chance to hear from both of you. Really big in your own specific industries and fields, and really working on the cutting edge stuff with AI and your specific industry. So really grateful for both of your time. And just one last takeaway question that you can answer, in brief. What do you hope people will take away from this conversation? Any actions that you would encourage people to embrace, critical thinking we just talked about, or embrace being in these spaces where you can have an open dialogue about these ethical considerations, or just, people in the creative space. Really short, what you would say.
I think I would like to close with the idea that as long as users of these technologies, we have a choice, not to forget that we have a choice. If we're talking about, I'm thinking like social media, and as an early adopter of social media, I experienced a different way of social media, different genre, different flavor, different dynamic than what we are experiencing now. Do I have a choice? Is the current way in which social media works and the dynamics, is it toxic? Is it making me sad? Is it exacerbating mental health problems?
Yeah.
Sure. Do I have a choice? Sure. I choose not to be on social media. And from my perspective, the only way in which we can push, tech companies to create something, or in the only way in which we can imagine a new way of interacting with other people, that is not toxic, that is not just selling stuff or misinformation, is to abandon that bandwagon and hop into another one or imagine another one. And so the way I see it with AI, if to the degree that as users, as end users, we have a choice, exercise that choice. I think I'm not of the idea of, banning any of these technologies or pushing, the other way. It's more like, know that you have a choice, not that you can engage with it, that you can interact with it, you can play with it. But if you have a choice, and if you don't feel like this is a technology that will make your life better, exercise that right to a choice. And I think that seeing that even though people around the world might have different levels of choice in their lives with technology, um, I think let's not lose sight of what really matters, which is, the human experience.
Wow, indeed.
that's really great. Who would you say the audience is for this panel? Is it
So,
students? Is it
yeah,
professors? Is it
let's students in this field, and then there's faculty and people just interested in this field, but mostly we're targeting students.
okay? What I would say to students is please don't forget you're a human being. Please, this is a crazy time, but engage with other people. Go to shows, go to movies, be around people. Think about your mental health. Think about your community. Connect as much as possible. Think as soon as you feel like you're in a silo, everybody's speaking the same thing, politically, culturally, etc. Um, Move out. Don't be a joiner. It's just so easy to slip into like, okay, I'm comfortable here. From a professional perspective, we're in a really interesting flux. So don't just set it yourself down like, okay, this is going to be my career path. This is what's going to happen. I work in an industry where people that thought they were set are now looking because they didn't really pivot when things were going on. They think that things were going to be affecting them that way, but they are. But the reality is that you need to find your community, you need to find your people, you need to find your network, even though I don't like that word so much. You need to go explore other places. We're in an amazing time where localization, translation, all of those things are relatively instantaneous. It's magical. Just don't forget you're a human being. Be good to yourself also. We're in a really interesting flux, and I keep using that word, but we are, and you got to think about your mental health. You got to think about your physical health. Valeria, to your point, yes, I miss Friendster. I miss how people were just, the beginning of this, where like you knew people that were there. It's so
MySpace
easy
and
to, yeah, all of it, where it was just like you're seeing the segmentation right now happen. And also when you're around other people, like the vitriol that you see on social media is impossible. Because if you were to say those things to somebody, they'd punch you in the face. And you don't want to get punched in the face, so you wouldn't say those things. So you need to learn how to actually engage in human beings with other human beings. It's like that's the most important part. You learn from each other. If you're just on your device and you think that this is going to happen, you're not going to learn. And we're in an accelerated space right now, which could be magical. I mean, obviously, there's challenges, climate, economics, wars, but they've always been there in one form or another. It's just, trust yourself, pivot as much as possible, travel, be around other people who are not your culture, not your language. Eat as much different things as you possibly can, and you're going to be all right.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a well-rounded conversation, not just focused on AI and art, but like the human experience in living. So really grateful for both of your time, and we look forward to getting in touch again and continuing this conversation and maybe some projects that we could do with students in the future.
Awesome.
So yes,
Awesome.
Pleasure
I
to
would
meet
love
you
that.
all, and thank you for this, Ishita. This is a great
yeah, absolutely. Thank
program, and
you.
looking forward to future iterations
Awesome
together.
work, Ishita. I was not doing this at your age, definitely. I was like thinking about a whole other stuff.
Thank
Well
you so much.
done. Good
I
training, good faculty, good stuff. This is great. This is awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much all for being here today and hope you have a great day or evening ahead.
That
Yeah.
was wonderful,
Okay.
you all. Every month I think, oh my gosh, this was my favorite one. And I think
It
I feel
keeps
the same way
getting
again today. This was really great. And Darek, your conversation at the end for students, I think that that advice is good for any human. So thank you for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
And I will connect with you all and see what else we can do with this conversation. Wonderful
Awesome.
job,
Okay.
Ishita.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Ishita. Valeria, let's stay in touch. Okay.
Bye, Derek. Yes, yes. Let's stay in touch. Bye, Sarah. Bye,
Okay.
Ishita. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Sarah. Bye, Ishita.